They laughed because you stayed quiet. They mistook your patience for weakness, your kindness for surrender, and your silence for fear. Every insult became entertainment. Every betrayal became another scene in a game where they believed you'd never fight back. They smiled while they pushed you lower, convinced you would spend your whole life begging for a place at their table. That's the funny thing about people. They only respect pain after it changes someone's face. They never notice the storm while it's gathering. They only panic when the lightning finally strikes. You kept carrying the weight they handed you. You forgave what should never have been forgiven. You gave chances to people who collected them like trophies. They fed on your doubt because it made them feel powerful. They wrote your story before you ever picked up the pen, believing you would always be the harmless one, the easy target, the backup plan, the name nobody remembered. Then something broke. Not your spirit, your need for their approval. The moment you stopped explaining yourself, they became uncomfortable. The moment you walked away, they started chasing. The moment you chose peace over permission, the people who mocked you suddenly had questions they couldn't answer. They weren't prepared for someone who no longer cared about applause. They weren't ready for a person who had nothing left to prove. The most dangerous transformation isn't louder words or bigger threats. It's becoming impossible to manipulate. It's reaching the point where guilt no longer controls you, where disrespect earns distance instead of another excuse. That's when the game changes. That's when the people who treated you like a joke realize they accidentally created someone who doesn't need them anymore. Because the greatest revenge was never destroying them. It was becoming someone their opinions could never touch. They looked at your kindness and saw an opportunity. They looked at your patience and saw permission. Every time you stayed calm instead of starting a fight, they convinced themselves you were too weak to defend yourself. Every time you forgave another betrayal, they believed they had earned the right to do it again. That's how people work when they're addicted to control. They don't respect the person who keeps giving. They respect the person who knows exactly when to stop. You smiled while carrying wounds nobody noticed. You kept showing up with respect, even when respect never came back. They laughed behind your back, ignored your value to your face, and acted like your loyalty was something they deserved, instead of something they should have appreciated. The strange part is they never questioned their behavior. They questioned why you stayed. They mistook silence for surrender. They confused mercy with fear. They thought your ability to stay composed meant you didn't have the courage to become dangerous. That was the biggest illusion they ever believed. A person who controls their anger is far more unpredictable than someone who throws it around every day. The loudest people usually reveal every move before making it. The quiet ones simply disappear from the game without warning. Every insult became another brick. Every betrayal became another lesson. Every disappointment sharpened your awareness until you could recognize fake smiles before a single word was spoken. Pain has a strange way of removing illusions. It teaches faster than comfort ever could. The people who wanted to break you ended up educating you instead. They expected another apology, another explanation, another chance they didn't deserve. They expected you to keep carrying relationships that only survive because you refused to let them die. They never imagined you'd wake up one day and realize that not every connection deserves to be saved. Some people only remain in your life because you've been carrying their weight for too long. The moment you stopped proving your worth, everything changed. Suddenly they wanted conversations. Suddenly they wanted your attention. Suddenly they acted surprised that the version of you they took for granted no longer existed. Funny how absence creates value where presence never could. People don't always miss you because they love you. Sometimes they miss the access they had to your kindness. They miss the version of you that accepted disrespect without consequences. They miss having someone who always returned, no matter how badly they behaved. Kindness was never your weakness. It was your choice. The real power was knowing you could remain decent in a world full of people who celebrated cruelty, and still decide that your peace was worth more than their approval, your boundaries stronger than their opinions, and your silence more terrifying than any argument you could have started. The day you stopped begging for approval was the day their control began to disappear. Until then, they had been feeding on your need to be accepted. Every compliment they gave felt like a reward. Every insult felt like a punishment. They had quietly trained you to measure your worth through their opinions. And as long as they controlled that scoreboard, they controlled you. Think about how much of your life was spent trying to convince people you were enough. You worked harder than everyone else, stayed loyal longer than anyone else, forgave things you should have walked away from, and still found yourself wondering why it was never enough. That's because approval is a game designed to keep you chasing. The finish line keeps moving every time you get close. The people who crave control understand one simple truth. If they can make you desperate for their validation, they never have to respect you. They'll hand you tiny pieces of attention just to keep you invested. They'll disappear when you need them most and return only when they realize you're finally starting to move on. It's not affection. It's management. Then something inside you changed. You stopped asking if they liked you. You started asking if they deserved access to your life. That single question flipped the entire balance of power. Suddenly, you weren't auditioning anymore. You became the one making the decisions. You realized that acceptance from people who never respected you was never going to heal the emptiness they created. It's strange how uncomfortable people become when they can no longer predict you. They were used to your long explanations, your constant apologies, your endless efforts to fix problems you didn't create. They expected another message, another chance, another emotional rescue mission. Instead, they found silence. Not the silence of defeat, but the silence of someone who had finally found peace without their permission. The most frightening person isn't the one screaming for attention. It's the one who no longer needs to be noticed. Confidence doesn't announce itself. It simply changes the way you walk through the world. You stop shrinking to fit into rooms that never welcomed you. You stop editing your personality just to make insecure people comfortable. You stop carrying the burden of proving your value to those determined not to see it. The funny part is they often notice your worth only after you've stopped trying to show it. The moment your focus shifts toward your own growth, they suddenly become curious. They wonder why you aren't reacting anymore. They wonder why their words no longer hit the same. They mistake your peace for arrogance because they've never seen someone escape a game they thought was impossible to leave. Real freedom begins when your self-worth no longer depends on applause. When rejection becomes information instead of a wound, manipulation loses its grip. Approval becomes optional, respect becomes non-negotiable, and your identity stops belonging to the crowd and starts belonging to the person staring back at you in the mirror. Everyone thinks revenge has to be loud. They imagine shouting, fighting, proving a point, making sure the whole world watches the final act. That's what emotional people do. They hand their enemies one last performance. They waste their energy trying to win arguments with people who were never interested in the truth. The crowd cheers for the drama, then forgets both names by tomorrow. The move that no one expects is walking away without asking for permission. No speeches. No explanations. No desperate attempts to make people understand what they already chose to ignore. You simply remove yourself from a place where your value was constantly questioned. That kind of silence is unsettling because it leaves people alone with their own actions. They expected another reaction, another emotional outburst they could twist into a story that made you look unstable. They counted on your anger because anger is easy to control. Push the right button, get the same response, repeat the cycle. It's almost mechanical. They become the puppeteer, and you become the puppet dancing to emotions they created. Then one day, the strings are gone. You stop answering every insult. You stop defending yourself against lies invented by people who never intended to believe you anyway. You stop chasing those who enjoy being chased. Suddenly, the game they've mastered has no player left. The silence becomes louder than every argument you could have started. That's the part nobody prepares for. When you walk away, they begin talking more than ever. They call you cold. They call you selfish. They invent reasons for your absence because accepting the real one would force them to confront the damage they caused. It's easier to create a villain than admit they pushed away someone who genuinely cared. Distance has a strange effect on people. While you're available, they assume you'll always be there. The moment you're gone, every ignored message, every broken promise, every careless word starts echoing inside their own mind. They begin replaying moments they once dismissed. Not because you've changed the past, but because your absence removed the distraction that kept them from seeing it. Walking away isn't about making someone suffer. It's about refusing to suffer just to keep someone comfortable. There comes a point where loyalty becomes self-destruction, where forgiveness becomes permission, and where patience becomes a prison you built with your own hands. Freedom begins the moment you stop confusing sacrifice with love. The strongest people don't leave because they stopped caring. They leave because they finally started caring about themselves. They understand that peace is too expensive to trade for temporary acceptance. They'd rather be misunderstood from a distance than appreciated only when they're useful. The funniest part is that people often chase what they ignored. The attention they once took for granted suddenly becomes valuable. The presence they barely noticed becomes impossible to replace. Not because you became someone new overnight, but because your absence exposed the value they were too distracted to recognize while you stood right in front of them, refusing to return to a stage where respect was always just another joke waiting for the next laugh. Pain has a funny way of introducing itself. It never knocks. It doesn't ask whether you're ready. It walks straight into your life wearing the face of someone you trusted, someone you defended, someone you would have sacrificed everything for. That's why betrayal cuts deeper than failure. Failure teaches you what to improve. Betrayal teaches you who was pretending to stand beside you, while quietly waiting for you to fall. They thought every disappointment would make you smaller. Every insult was meant to chip away at your confidence. Every lie was designed to make you question your own reality. They expected the pressure to crush you, because that's what usually happens. Most people spend years trying to recover from what others did to them. They carry old wounds like permanent identities, introducing themselves through the pain instead of the person they could become. But something unusual happened. Instead of becoming bitter, you became aware. Every broken promise sharpened your instincts. Every fake smile became easier to recognize. Every moment of rejection forced you to discover strengths you never would have searched for if life had stayed comfortable. Comfort creates habits. Pain creates vision. The people who underestimated you accidentally became your greatest teachers. They showed you the cost of trusting too quickly. They showed you the danger of ignoring red flags just because your heart wanted a different story. They showed you that loyalty without boundaries isn't kindness. It's surrender disguised as love. You stopped asking why they betrayed you. You started asking why you ignored the signs for so long. That question changed everything. Blaming them forever would have kept you trapped inside yesterday. Learning from the experience gave tomorrow a completely different shape. Scars are strange. Some people spend their lives hiding them because they're embarrassed by what happened. Others wear them like proof that they survived something powerful enough to destroy them but failed. The scar doesn't represent weakness. It represents a battle you refuse to lose. Strength isn't built inside perfect moments. It's built in the middle of chaos, where every part of you wants to quit, where your confidence is hanging by a thread, where nobody is clapping, and nobody is coming to rescue you. That's where identity is forged. Not in comfort, but in pressure. The greatest transformation happens when you stop asking life to be fair. Fairness is a fantasy invented by people waiting for permission to move forward. Reality doesn't owe anyone balance. It only offers choices. Stay trapped inside resentment, or use every painful experience as another brick in the foundation of the person you're becoming. One betrayal can make you wiser than 10 years of comfort. One heartbreak can reveal truths that endless happiness never could. One season of being underestimated can create a level of discipline that success alone would never inspire. The people who wanted to leave you broken never expected your pain to become your weapon. They expected tears. They expected excuses. They expected surrender. Instead, every insult became fuel. Every rejection became discipline. Every setback became another reason to keep building a version of yourself that no longer needed revenge, because your growth had already become the loudest answer they would ever receive. The greatest illusion people believe is that control lasts forever. They think once they've figured you out, you'll stay exactly the same. They'll keep pushing your limits because you never pushed back before. They'll keep crossing boundaries because you kept erasing them. They'll keep treating you like an option because you always returned after every disappointment. They become so comfortable with the old version of you that they never notice the new one being built in silence. Real change doesn't happen the day you announce it. It happens in the moments nobody sees. While everyone is busy talking about your past, you're quietly burying it. While they're laughing at the person you used to be, you're becoming someone they won't recognize when the laughter finally stops. Transformation isn't loud. It's patient. It grows in the dark. Away from applause, away from approval, away from people who only believe in what they can immediately see. There comes a point where you stop reacting to every insult, because not every voice deserves access to your emotions. You stop explaining your boundaries, because people who truly respect them never needed an explanation in the first place. You stop chasing people who celebrate your absence while expecting unlimited access to your presence. That's not confidence. That's self-respect finally replacing desperation. The people who once manipulated you become confused. Their old methods stop working. The guilt no longer affects you. The silent treatment no longer scares you. The insults no longer define you. They keep pressing the same buttons, unaware that those buttons no longer exist. That's what happens when someone heals. The places that once caused unbearable pain become empty spaces where manipulation used to live. Control only survives where fear exists. The moment fear leaves, control dies with it. They counted on your fear of being alone, your fear of rejection, your fear of disappointing everyone around you. They built invisible chains from those fears, convincing you that freedom would cost too much. Then one day you realized the chains were never locked. You had simply forgotten you could walk away. The strongest person in the room isn't the loudest one. It's the one who cannot be emotionally purchased. Praise doesn't control them. Criticism doesn't destroy them. Approval doesn't inflate them. Rejection doesn't shrink them. Their identity no longer changes with every opinion thrown in their direction. That's a level of freedom few people ever experience, because most spend their lives renting their confidence from strangers. When people can no longer predict your reactions, they lose their influence over your choices. They don't know how to manipulate someone who values peace more than attention. They don't know how to intimidate someone who has already survived their worst treatment. They don't know how to defeat someone who stopped measuring success by revenge and started measuring it by inner strength. The final victory isn't making them regret losing you. The final victory is reaching a place where their regret no longer matters, where their opinions become background noise, their games become invisible, and their power disappears because you finally understand that the only permission you ever needed to become unstoppable was your own, and the person they once treated like a joke became someone they could never control again.